If your boat has been sitting a while, you need to make sure there's no water or microbes that can clog your filters and stop your engine. But how do you do that? Hi, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I give you our easy, do-it-yourself method of polishing our fuel. This episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Infinity, the most trusted name in woven vinyl flooring in the marine industry. Since 2008, Infinity has offered boat owners premier flooring options, proven to withstand even the most demanding environments. Each of their products is equipped with UV-stable fade resistance and antimicrobial technology, giving them both durability and a style that can't be matched. Thinking about kicking carpet to the curb? Make the switch to Infinity and see the difference that true luxury makes. Visit InfinityLWV.com and use the coupon code BG20 for 10% off any area rug. Limit one per customer. Anytime our boat sits for a bit, we want to polish the fuel before putting her back in the water. And although we leave the fuel tanks full, condensation can still occur. And you never know what may grow in the tanks. Microbes love water and multiply in it at the bottom of the tank. Biocides can only do so much. Why worry about water, sludgy microbes, and debris? Well, the immediate problem is that your engine will die. It won't run on water, and debris can block the flow of fuel. That's bad enough if it happens as you're entering a tricky place, say a marina or going through a bridge. But the even bigger problem is that both water and debris can cause thousands of dollars of damage to your engine. Now, it's important to know, even with a Raycor filter on your fuel line, if there is just too much water in the fuel, it can get past the filter on the smaller Raycors that most recreational boaters have. Large Raycor systems sometimes do have a check valve that'll stop the flow if water reservoir is full. Smaller ones don't. Always check the sight bowl in your Raycor for water at the end of a day. Check it several times a day if motoring a long time in order to catch a problem before your engine is damaged. Sludge and debris can clog a Raycor in mere hours, again causing your engine to just stop. Fuel polishing is pumping all the fuel out of your fuel tanks, running it through a filter to remove water and debris, and putting it back into the tank. Some professional services also clean the tank while it's empty. Now, when might you need to polish your fuel? Or when your boat is sat for a while in a humid climate, particularly with day-night temperature swings causing heavy dew or fog, both indicators that condensation is likely in the tank. If you have a new-to-you boat that hasn't been used recently, discovering that a fuel cap was loose and water or dirt may have entered the tank, someone confusing the water and fuel fills and putting water in the fuel. Yeah, it can happen. Getting a load of bad fuel, discovering an abnormal amount of water or debris in your Raycor filter, or before going out in boisterous conditions if the fuel hasn't been polished recently. Any water and debris that has settled to the bottom of the tank will be stirred up with the motion of the boat. In many places, there are commercial fuel polishing services, but it always seems that when we need our fuel cleaned, there are none available. They're prohibitively expensive, or there's a long wait for service. Hence, doing it ourselves. Now, we know some people who have fitted an electrical fuel pump and filtering loop into the fuel systems in their boat. That's also an option for doing it yourself, albeit more expensive. Let's first talk about the tools that you need. It costs about $100 to get the tools that needed to do it our way, assuming that you already have a drill or you use an electric pump and that you have or borrow jerry cans. Now, the tools that you're going to need, I've put links to all of these in the show notes, but let's go over them real quickly. You're going to need a way to pump fuel out of your tank. If your boat uses diesel, you can use a simple drill pump, as diesel is not explosive. That's what we do. You can also use various electric fuel pumps designed for diesel. Now, don't use a drill pump with gasoline. Instead, use a pump that's approved for gas. The next thing that you're going to need is a weight on the end of the pickup tube so that you can get all the contents of the fuel tank out. Dave had some weird fitting, basically a bolt with a hole through it, but a couple of stainless nuts will work for you. Be sure to use something that won't rust. Make a hole through the tubing and use a piece of seizing wire to keep the weight from slipping off. You're going to need sufficient containers to hold the contents of one tank of fuel. Jerry cans are great, and you may be able to borrow some empty ones from friends, too. You can also use 5-gallon buckets lined with clean trash bags. Whatever you use, you have to have sufficient containers to be able to remove all of the fuel from one tank at a time. You can, of course, transfer the fuel from one tank through the filter and into another if you have an empty tank. Of course, you may want to clean the empty tank first. The next thing that you need is a water and particulate filter. Cruisers have used Baja filters for years, but they are no longer made, and used ones sell for a minor fortune. We have a Baja filter, but I've talked to a number of people who have other brands, and the Mr. Funnel ones sold on Amazon are considered to work better than anything else. Again, there's a link in the show notes. I don't have personal experience with the Mr. Funnel, but several people have told me that the West Marine filters don't do nearly as good a job of filtering water out. You also need a way to transfer the fuel from the jerry can through the filter and into the tank. Yes, you could hand pour it, but you'll have a sore back if you try that. You could use the same pump that you use to get the fuel out of the tank. But the far easier and faster way is to use one of those nifty shaker siphons. I'm going to put a link to the article I wrote about those and also to buying them in the show notes. Finally, you need a container to put any water caught in the filter into for transport to an appropriate disposal site. It must be treated as hazardous waste. And you're going to need some rags, paper towels, or blue shop towels to catch spills as necessary. Now, how do you do it? Well, you pump all the fuel from one tank into jerry cans or other containers. You can use the water sediment filter as you're filling the containers, or you can filter it as it goes back into the tank. Or you can even filter it on both transfers if you fear serious contamination. Now wiggle the pickup tube around as much as you can to make sure you've gotten as much fuel out as possible. If the boat is in the water, have anyone else on board move so that one part of the tank is the lowest, and you'll get the most out. If you filter the fuel coming out and find a lot of water or sediment, it's a good idea to go ahead and clean the tank before you refill it. How you do this depends on your tank configuration. Maybe wiping out the inside through an inspection port. On our current boat, the only way to do it is to remove the pickup tube from the tank, then go through that hole with a rag on a stick. If you filtered the fuel coming out of the tank, you can simply use the shaker siphon and put the fuel directly into the tank now. Otherwise, put the funnel filter into the fill hole and use the shaker siphon to put the fuel into the funnel filter and filter the fuel as it goes into the tank. Dave finds it easier to filter at this point, but it means that if he finds lots of water or gunk and decides he needs to clean the tank, he has to pump the fuel back out of the tank to do so. Whenever you are filtering the fuel, if the filter really slows down, check it for both sediment and water. Clean the filter if necessary. Pour any water into the container for this purpose and dispose of it properly. And repeat the whole process for any other fuel tanks on board. That's it. You're good to go, and you should have clean and waterless fuel. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, and thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to share it with your friends.